Hello, everyone. I'm Shruti Kuntekar, Marketing Manager at Kloves. Thank you for joining us in our Kloves monthly webinar. Today, we'll be discussing automated test framework in ServiceNow. Here's the agenda. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to go through housekeeping, talk about Kloves, followed by the presentation, and finally Q&A. This webinar will be recorded, and you will be able to access it later. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section in your Zoom control panel, and a panelist will answer them. If you have any questions that are not directly related to the webinar, please email us at sales@closing.com. Our social media channels are listed here, and you can also access our previous webinars at our Kloves YouTube channel. A little about Kloves. We are a ServiceNow partner since 2011. We are based out of Santa Clara, very close to the ServiceNow headquarters. We are a full ServiceNow shop with 250 plus customers, several implementations, and we have executed projects globally. In terms of services, we provide end-to-end services. Our focus has been on customer service management, end-user portals, and HR service delivery. Our panelist today is Mike Nelson, who is a ServiceNow technical consultant at Kloves. Mike, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'll stop sharing at this point and let you take over.
Are we good to go?
Yes, I can hear you, Mike.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, guys. All right. So ServiceNow has came out with the automated test framework a few versions back, and it's really been a calling. So I'm excited to show what I have here. I'm really going to go through some basic stuff, and I think that there's room for other webinars in the future. So please stay tuned. What we are going to cover today is why would we even do something like this? And it's kind of a quick explanation there, but also some of the basics. I want to get those covered as far as activation, the different plugins that are available. Some of the properties, they've added a few properties in the last couple versions, so I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the new properties, as well as some specific ones that definitely need to be in different instances, and we'll cover that. Then I would like to talk about just creating a test. It's going to be a fairly simple one, but also I think something that everyone can relate to. And that will be the gist of this whole webinar, is setting up that test. So I really want hands-on experience here a little bit. So we'll take a look at the tool. Most of this hour will be spent there and creating that test. So after a simple test, I just want to talk about the suite that's available, and that's putting all the tests together if so desired, and really look at just kind of a brief overview of setting those up, and then how you can customize that. Okay, so looking at those suites, it'll just be kind of an overview, and then a quick overview of the test results coming from of the test that we did create. And the last part, I would like to cover what's new in Madrid. They've developed a few new pieces to automated test framework, and I'd cover that, as well as what's coming up in New York. Now, I know it's not everything that's probably going to be there, but at least get some items out there to take a look. All right, let's get started. So to me, and I think the picture says a lot, duh. And just being able to save a lot of time, and that's probably the biggest one for me. And I see other companies that testing takes a lot of time, and it's also kind of a boring, tedious job. So I've seen some great testers out there, and I appreciate those people a lot. They just seem to be far and few. But if you can make this automated and make the computer work for you, what a great opportunity. And in the long run, that's going to save money. It makes going to the next version easier. ServiceNow definitely keeps everybody at the cutting edge, which is fantastic. Everybody gets the benefits of new versions, but it takes a lot to get all the departments together and say, all right, we're upgrading to the next version. We're going to spend this much time for development, this much time for testing, and sometimes it's just not there. I've seen a lot of projects where the development may go long, but all right, where are we going to make up this time? Well, we're going to make it up in testing. So then testing is rushed. And it shouldn't be, to make sure that everything gets done appropriately. Okay, so I always see that too, and I don't want to, because if there's good testing done, then when you go to production, there isn't the hair on fire critical issues that we need to take care of. So, that just takes care of making a great product even better. Okay. And I think that all this can be avoided. All these issues can be avoided with automated testing, because it'll point out the little things, and as it develops and you increase your suites of testing themselves, then it just gets better. So I think it's a great opportunity. Okay, let's get into the bits and pieces. I just kind of wanted to cover some of the plugins, the very basic automated test framework. It is just setting up that. And what I've highlighted here in red are the items, at least in the last instance that was created for me. All of these were installed except for reporting and responsive dashboards. So do take a look at that, especially if you're coming from prior versions of ServiceNow, to make sure that these are available. Okay. Navigator just validates access to the application Navigator. Custom UI is a fairly new one, so that you can look at custom UI objects and be able to test on those. Parameters is new in Madrid, and for this, it's a great opportunity if you need to test multiple tests with just different data. Okay, so you can set up the parameters for a specific test and have hundreds of different ways of approaching that test. So here you can set up the parameters that are going to look at that test, and that test will continue to run until all those parameters have been tested. Okay, the two highlighted in red again, reporting gives you a great opportunity to report on your test framework, and the dashboard gives a great overview of those tests and what's been tested and how often. So to me, that's a great management feature where you can get a bird's eye view of those tests. REST inbound, okay, so you can test an inbound REST and make sure that that's working appropriately. Scheduling so that you can schedule a specific tests on specific days or times. One of the great examples I can always see is if GRC is requiring that a specific test happens once a month, for example. You'll be able to go out there and see if there is a change record for a specific password change or something like that. So great opportunity there for a schedule, but just setting up a large suite and having it scheduled to go off at midnight. You go home, it takes off, and when you get to work the next morning, you can start looking at your test results. Okay, a couple other plugins is the Whitelist. And here, if you're running a test and there are expected errors to happen, then you're able to take a look at those or at least whitelist those errors so it doesn't stop your test. Another good example of that may be something is broken and a developer is working on it. Well, it doesn't stop the tester from using that specific test. Maybe they can move on if it's something that can be ignored, at least at the moment. So you can create a whitelist and let that client error go, and the process will continue. Survey, so ability to test surveys. So if you send a survey out, you can automate the response to that survey and check those results. A newer piece is the service catalog plugins, and you'll see a lot of this where this is user intervention as far as creating maybe a catalog and posting it as a record producer. So here's a great opportunity to set up those service catalog tests with specific data and going back to parameterizing some of that data so that you can create many tests and run those. And it could be on many different catalog items or setting up your carts and so forth. So that's what those plugins are there for. Moving on to the next item. The first two I definitely want to highlight because these are set up for a production and a non-production environment. Okay, so you don't want to have ATF enabled in a production environment. Okay, strongly recommend do not do that. Okay, so if you change these will be true in your non-production environment. Okay, and one thing to highlight that if you change this to true in your non-production environment, it does not go to an update set. Okay, and highlight again, these two have to be false in production. Okay, next one, debugging. This just adds additional testing results, specifically on the UI pages. It'll save the UI test results in a JSON record, so it's pretty easy to see. Okay, screenshots. The different options are enable for all steps. So every time a specific step comes up, it'll take a screenshot and attach it to the test results. Other options are enabled for just failed steps. Okay, so if something did not work, then it will just show the failed. Okay, and then the last one is disable for all steps. Timeout. So this is just a specific when to give up on taking that screenshot. Okay, and this is really based on different environments. So if you're not getting screenshots, yeah, definitely set that time to a longer time and make sure that it's captured. And if it's not, then you can reduce that. Okay, minimum height of the screenshot. I think that's pretty obvious there, just the size of it. I think that default is set at 600 pixels, which it does get a little grainy. So if you're looking for something specific, you may want to increase that. And then the next one is the width, and the default for that is 800 pixels. And if that's not enough, just increase them, and it's easier to see any specific data that would be captured on that page. Okay. Page data capture enabled. When true, it'll wait until the custom UI refreshes. And that's probably the most common. Heartbeat timeout. How long until considered offline? Okay, and then this is in seconds. And then same thing for server. I think that, well, I know that the offline one, it should be set in between 120 and 1800, and the default is 120. For the server, it's set for 60 seconds. And then the retention for how long, and this is number of days, this isn't seconds, on when to delete some of that data. Some other properties, I'm going to kind of go through these a lot quicker. Setting up test suite results to display the test suite aging report. That's what that one's for. Failed results. When this is true, the scheduled suite test result emails only show results that have failed. When it's false, it displays all. Okay. Test history. Just max test history there, and max depth on how deep it's going to go when printing suite results. And it's sent to emails, and then we have colors, okay? So for a failed, it can be the red color, or error orange, pass blue, whatever so desire for each color of the result of the test. Okay, creating a test. When you're going in, you got to really think about the steps that you want to do in a specific test. Now, what I'd like to demonstrate is basically just creating a change request from start to finish on an emergency change. Okay, so you got to think of all the items that need to be done here. You need to create the record. There are some specific data that needs to be in it before it can go to the next step. What needs to be approved and then pushed through the workflow through the whole process, okay, including implement and finish. Okay, so you really got to think about each one of those steps and who is going to impersonate each one of those steps as you go on. A couple other things to think about. What do you want to test for? What are the results that you're going to expect? What items should be visible? What items should be mandatory? What items should be read-only? So you can really get in depth there. I'm not going to get that deep in our test for sake of time, but you'll kind of get the idea of the process as we go. Okay. The different types of steps that can be done. So you have UI, so what's the user going to input? Different server tests, what's going to happen on the back end. I did put parameterized tests on there, basically so that we can think of different parameters that are going to be sent for a specific test. What whitelist errors are going to talk about. So we talked about that on the plugin. There's going to be specific errors that are going to happen. Maybe they're good errors, or at least that this should happen. So we don't want the process to stop on those. And then we're going to take a look at the progress of an automated test, so you can look and see how far along the test may be. So for suites, some of these suites could take quite a while depending on how many tests that are in that suite. So looking at the progress, making sure that it's running is always a good step. And then passing data from one test to the next step. Okay, so it may be that we create a record. Well, the next step may want to open that record. We'll want to know what that specific record is so that we can go look at it. Okay? And then right now we're going to go into a demo, just create a step. Now this part is going to be a little bit on the tedious side once we get going, but I definitely wanted to show some of the steps that that would be created as we go. Okay, so if you go to the Navigator on the left-hand side, type in automated, the automated test framework application menu will be filtered down. The very first one is tests. So if I click on test, it will list all the tests here. ServiceNow is coming out with a lot of different tests. Okay, so you can see that I've waited too long now. Let me log in here real quick and we'll get back going. Sorry guys. Small pause. Okay, so at least this gives me a good opportunity to start back from the beginning. So if I type in automated in my Navigator, automated test framework will show up. I hope. Try this again. Automated. You can see I already have the list over here on the right-hand side, but typing in Navigator, automated test framework, there's the tests, and here they are listed. So we're going to go ahead and create a new one and take a look at those parameters a little bit, or each one of those fields. Okay, so pretty simple, the name of my test. Okay. Let's see here. Just call it something simple like that. Description. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to create an emergency type change and go through the workflow from new to close. Okay, go ahead and save that. Now we got to think about, like I said before, about all the steps that are going to be created. Okay, we look at a couple of the fields here, and one thing that I forgot to point out is I would always create your tests in the appropriate application. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be doing change management. I'm going to use the application change management ATF. Okay, and then you can see that that's reflected right there. Active, whether this is active or not, and then enable parameterized testing. So if this is enabled, it shows the related lists for those parameters. Okay, and I'm not going to do it with a specific one. Okay, add a test. Now this will bring up kind of a wizard to get you through the process. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do in this change is we're going to impersonate someone. Okay, and you can see the different topics here on the left-hand side, and that'll break out each one of these, and you kind of get an idea of what each one is as we go through the process. So I think they're pretty self-explanatory as we go through them, but we'll give some good examples all the way through in this process. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to impersonate a user. You can see the execution order, so this is going to be our first step. And The user I'm going to impersonate is good old Beth. Okay, pretty easy. We can put notes in here if we so desire. Anything simple. Just impersonate user Beth and submit. Okay, so that started our first step. And you got to picture this kind of in the background of exactly what we're going to do. So we impersonated Beth. The next thing we're going to do is create a new change record. Okay, so again, if we look at on the left-hand side here of what's going to be created next, form. Okay. And we are going to do a record insert. Let's see if I'm in the right spot here. Server side. There we go. Okay, we're going to do a record insert. And this is right after the impersonate. And we're going to set what table it's going to be. And you see that there's a couple different other things here too. We've got assertion type. So what we're going to look for is that the record is going to be successfully inserted. We are going to enforce security. Okay, so Beth does have to have the right rights here, or this is going to fail. And we're going to look at change requests. Okay, different fields we're going to look at. Let's use description, emergency workflow, assignment group. We're going to assign to, let's say, the service desk. And that's probably enough for now. Let's go ahead and submit that one. Okay, next step. Well, let's add some more information to that specific record, just as an example. Okay, so let's do, this time let's do a record update. Okay, and we're going to look at the same table. Okay, so ServiceNow is smart enough to say, all right, you probably want that last table. Now, what record do I want? Okay, so I'm going to use what we just created in that last step. Okay, so right here in step 2, I can expand that. And what am I going to grab? Am I going to grab the record or the table? I want the record. Okay, so that you can see that it's going to grab that record, and that's what it's going to query. Okay, and let's add, well, since it's an emergency, we need to make sure that the type is emergency. Okay, we'll go ahead and submit that. Next step. Okay, we're going to open that existing record. Okay, so this is more of a UI look. Okay, let's see, on the form, there we go. We're going to open an existing record. And again, it's going to know what table we want. We're looking at change request. Same thing. Now, in step 2, it is still that record that we're looking for. So this is the same parameter that we're going to grab. Okay, from step 2. And you can see that we're at step 4 already. You can also select which view you want to. If you do not select a view, it is going to do the default view, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Okay. Next step. Okay. And if you think about the next step that needs to be done, I need a UI action. Let's see here, not custom though. There we go. I'm going to click on a specific UI action. Okay, and this is what I want is I want this to be approved, okay, or at least asked for approval, okay. So just search here for the different UI possibilities, UI actions. I'm going to look for request approval, okay, and grab that one and submit. Okay, so at this point in time, I've created a change ticket, an emergency change ticket. I've added a little bit to it. Okay, so now that I'm in it as Beth, I pushed or basically pressed the approval button. So now my change ticket is asking for approval. Okay, what do I need to do next? I need to get that approved. Okay, well, Beth can't approve it, so I have to impersonate someone else. And in this case, Luke is one of the approvers. So I'm going to grab Luke. There he is. And we're going to impersonate Luke at this point in time. Okay, and you can see that these test steps keep building as we go down and the order that they're in. Okay, so the next step is, now that we're impersonating Luke, he has to do a record query, okay, because he's going to specifically look for that approval request. Okay, and what I'm looking for in this query is that we get at least one record that's matching. Okay, but we're not looking at change requests now. We're actually looking at the sys approval table. Okay, so if we just type in approval, let the instance catch up a little bit here. Approval, there it is, sys approval approver. Okay, and what we're specifically looking for is that the approver is, of course, Luke Wilson. There he is. And what are we approving? Well, we're specifically looking for the record that we created. Okay, so again, we can use this lookup here, and we are still looking at that specific record that we created initially. Okay, so in step 2, and we're going to submit that. Okay, once we have that record, we got to do something with it. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is we need to open it. Okay, so on the form side, open an existing record. I thought it was right up front. Forms. There we go. Open an existing record. What are we going to open? Yes, we're going to open the approval record itself. But this time, instead, we're looking for that specific record that we just queried in the last step. Okay, and we're going to, in this case, grab the first record. Okay, there should only be one, but that's what we're looking for, is the first record. Okay, so we have that record. Now what do we need to do? We need to approve it, basically. Okay, so our next step that we're going to add is we're going to set field values. Okay, right there in the form. And we're still looking at the same table, the approval table, and we are going to change the state to approved. Okay, very simple. In here, we could definitely set more fields if we so desired. Okay, the record is now, well, at least we changed the field on that record. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to click the UI action. There we go. To actually approve it, okay, or actually save it, okay. So the action that we're looking for is the save button, basically. The user is going to push the save button. And there's several different ones here. Okay, and we're going to submit that. So that's basically just the user pressing or clicking on the save button. All right, so we now have that record approved. The next steps that would happen in that change we need to go back and we need to impersonate Beth again. Okay, so real simple. We've done this a couple times. Coming in here, there's Beth. I can type. There she is. Submit that. Okay, so now we're back as Beth. What's our next step? So next step we need to bring that record back. Okay, so we need to open an existing record. Back to form. Open an existing record. Not looking at sysapprover anymore. We're back at the change request itself. So we have to change that table. Change request. Specific record we're looking for, again, is the record that we created in step 2. Okay, so we grab that record. Again, same view is fine. Default view. Okay, and the next part that we're going to do, since it's approved, is we now have to move that change request from approved to scheduled. Okay, so on the form, we're looking for a field value validation. So we want to validate that this specific field is set to scheduled. Okay. Add our condition. The state is scheduled. And you can see that we're basically going through each one of our steps through here. I'm going to submit that. All right, we're getting there. Okay, so now that we check to see if it's scheduled, we want to press the button. So we're going to click a UI action right there to basically get it to the implement stage. Okay, so this would be Beth going into this change request, and we're going to specifically press the implement button. The screen's coming over here. Implement. Okay, and we're going to submit that. So you can see that we're going through each one of these steps, and this whole process is actually going to take 24 different steps. Okay, so in sake of time, I did want to make sure that we covered a lot of those different steps that are here. There are a whole lot more options in Service Catalog. Okay, so you can imagine, and I think this would be another great topic to bring up for another webinar, is just doing a process for Service Catalog and setting these up. Okay, there's custom UIs, so we can specifically set up different parameters on the page itself that we can specifically be looking at. These are these different steps here. Forms in the service portal. Again, it's the same idea as everything that we've been working on, just on the portal side. Okay, and I really think that there's a lot of effort that should be done as far as testing on the service portal side, because that's usually more your customer facing base. So you really want to make sure that that's working appropriately. Okay. For sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get out of this one, and we're going to basically just pretend that we went through all the other steps. Okay. So I'm going to bring up this screen and fast forward us a little bit to these different steps. So we got to step 14, okay, where we changed it to implement. And going through these kind of quickly, the next step is we would query that specific record and validate that there is at least one change task that has been created. Okay, so I'm actually going to go into this record and take a quick look at it and see that, okay, this is how we're going to check to make sure that the workflow created that task for the implementation team to work on. Okay, there's a couple things that we could also test on this specific record. Once it was created, who is it assigned to? Is it assigned to the right person? Are there mandatory fields that need to be populated before the close, and so forth? Okay, and I do have a couple of those a little further down. Okay, but looking at that, we created that implementation task. We're going to open that task and grab that record from record 15 and open that record. We're going to validate a couple fields. The state is open, okay, and make sure that that process is done. Then we're actually going to go back to the change record after that's done, and we're going to, as you can imagine, an emergency workflow going is then we're going to review the record. So same thing as in implement, we're going to create the UI action, only this time the review button. Okay. Couple of the other steps, I want to look at UI action visibility real quick. Okay, it's real simple. We want to make sure that the close field is available, and we can look at a bunch of different fields here. Okay, so if we just did a quick lookup, you can see that close button is available to the user. Okay, and we could check to see if the delete button was available to the user, and if it was, then maybe we had to say, okay, well, for that user it's not supposed to be. So there's an example of a false positive that we're looking for. Okay, the user cannot see the delete button. Good thing, that's what we want. We whitelist that one as a good error and continue. Okay. Following steps are just going to close off this specific emergency change. Okay, so we can confirm that these are mandatory fields. Okay, so we're looking at that specific validation. Not only were we looking to make sure that close button is there, but here we're specifically looking for, when we change it to close, that these fields are mandatory. Okay, and you can see that there's other options to be looking at too. So this whole time we could be making sure that fields are visible, fields that are not visible, which ones are read-only, okay, and whether they're not mandatory, and so forth. Okay, so a great opportunity there to really be looking at the form if the customer is specifically looking for those types of examples. The second to last step here, we're just populating that data. So close code, we're setting to successful. We're adding any close notes because these are mandatory. So if we don't populate them, then our test is going to come up with a failure. Okay. Last part, clicking that button, and we are closed. So from start to finish, here is the test, simple test of creating and an emergency test from start to finish. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and run this test. And of course, as you can imagine, it takes a little while to run these tests. Now, it's also looking to see what browser you're using and automating that. So if you've already ran this in a specific version of browser, then this is already there. But right now it's going to ask me, do I want to create a new test runner? And yes, I do. Okay, so that test is going to take off. You can see as it goes, it's basically flashing what the processes are. It's going through steps, taking screenshots as it goes, and tracking and checking each one of those steps that we were looking for. Okay. All right, as that's running, I want to try to catch up on a little bit of time and continue. You can copy any of those tests, so you don't have to start from scratch. We could copy that emergency test that we just did and then make it a standard test, for example. Okay, change the type, and then you're actually creating the next one as you're ready, and add those different fields and different checks that you would for a standard change. Okay. Just wanted to talk about suites as you're creating these many tests. How do you bring them all together? So the whole test suite, maybe just the whole process that you're going to run before an upgrade. Okay, and then each one of these may be a different group, like HR, maybe incident, or in our case, we did a change test. Okay. And underneath that may be an emergency change test, a standard or a routine. Maybe it may be as simple as just checking on the form of a change request the specific fields that are available or required or mandatory. Okay, so you can really break these out, create one suite, and have it scheduled to run as needed. Okay. My strongest point here that I'd like to make is, as far as best practices go, I would start small and build as you have tests created for each group. Okay. So different test results, and we'll take a look at these here in just a second. You're going to see different tests for each record. Okay. And each step as it went, and whether it was a pass, success, fail, or what went wrong. And then there's also availability to show more detail, so you can really debug what's going on. Then you have screenshots. Okay, so hopefully that's finished by now. 9 of 9, perfect. Okay. Going back to our screen, it's still running, and we've got a little bit more here to finish up. Going to grab a little bit more. So, okay, we'll give that a little bit more time to run and talk a little bit more about what's new in Madrid. Okay, so automated test framework properties. We did talk about the properties. The biggest one is the custom UI. So that you can capture more data. That's specific for that one. We can also develop testable custom components. So in a portal page, for example, if you wanted to make sure that a specific button had some details on it, or if you had so many items in a cart, you could check that. You can really get specific to what's on a UI page. Another thing that's new in Madrid is all the quick tests that have already been created for you. Okay, so the example of the emergency change is one of those quick start tests that can be created and given to you. And these are all by different applications too. So they have some good ones for incident, change, problem, some service portal examples. So great opportunity there. Something else that's new is you can add tests to a suite via filter. Okay, so if you were creating tests in this example, basically just on sprint 3, okay, so looking at tags based on sprint 3, we could grab all those tests and put them into the suite so that we could do a test on this sprint. If all tests are good, then we can promote the sprint into production. Custom UI steps being set or clicked on users for the interaction. Accessible to DOM, so you could set it up a specific check in there and have that looked at. Not excluded from customer UI testing. Okay, so i.e. not one that has its own specific test step. So that's kind of a nice nice add-on. Now also what is new is the ability to look at Page Inspector. Okay, so you can really get into some good debugging opportunities here and see what a specific item is doing. Okay, and this is kind of a good example of what's new. If I do create a page inspector, I can specifically look at different pieces of that page and see the results and make sure that the test is appropriate. We talked a little bit about parameter tests. I think this is a big one, and just having the ability to run the same test just with different data to make sure that the outcomes are coming out the way you want them to. A couple things that are new in New York. Before we get there, let's go see if our test results are there. There we go, 100% success. Okay, we can take a look at the results specifically. Okay, so you can see that this one has actually been ran before, but this one was just ran 7 minutes ago. Let's go ahead and take a look at those results. Okay, we had 24 steps. You can see them listed here, and all of them did succeed. There is a log. Okay, so we see 843 different items. That may be different depending on those parameters that you set up. Okay, so it depends how deep you're going in for specific items. And you can see those listed here in order. I won't bore you too much with that. And here's the transactions for each step. So we impersonated, gave a quick example. We can go into some detail, make sure that nothing too great there. But basically looking at each step, and here clicking the UI action, you can see the process, the transaction that actually is being done in the background to see what is done. Okay. Then up on top, we have some screenshots. Okay, so if we just wanted to view at a particular time, here's a screenshot. And like I said, it's a little grainy if you're using the smaller pixels, but it does save on size, save on space. But really what you're looking for is just what does that change request look like at this specific time. Okay, so there's other views. You can take the next view. Okay, this is at the authorized step. Yeah, it is an emergency change. We're at the authorized state. It's been requested by Beth. There is my description that I put in. So we got some good things to look at specifically at each one of these screenshots. Okay, skip one, we'll look at one more. Here's just the approval. So that you can see that Luke Wilson did approve this. And it's taken care of. So some really nice things to look at there at the different screenshots. You can see that there are 16 of them. We'll look at one more, look at the last one. Okay. Here we got the following fields. We're not done quite yet when this screenshot was taken. So maybe we got to look at what's going on there. But yet we know we populated them and that was successful too. Okay. So some good results there. If there's any errors, then we know that we need to fix those. Speeding up on time, I did want to get to some questions. This will be posted. So I am going to go through this rather quickly. Some good things on record query. ACLs are really being enforced more in New York. Automated test templates. So it's kind of nice. You can set up some templates as well as using tests within suites. One of the big changes is there's an option now to create a user. Okay, so in case we were impersonating Beth and Beth had moved on to a different role, she may not have changed any longer. Well, in this case, we could set up a user that's going to test our change, okay, and give them the appropriate roles, and then this test user will go away at the end because everything rolls back, okay. Attachments are easier to look at so that they can be attached and you can check to make sure, because there may be a business rule that requires an attachment at a certain step. Okay, here's some references on some of the things that I've talked about, and please feel free to look at those. And ServiceNow does do a great job on their documentation, so there's some good examples there also. Okay, I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg, but usually the iceberg is showing something that fails, so I had to throw the ice cream in there because it's a good thing. I know this is just a tip, but there's many different things to also look at. Okay, we got a little less than 5 minutes. Any questions?
Thank you. Great. That was really great, first of all, so thank you for that. Yes, we do have a few questions from the audience. Here's the first one. Is this useful only in new version upgrades? Can it also be used in application functionality testing?
Yes, it can. So different applications, that's where you would set up, you get into the right application. That is definitely best practices. Don't stay in global when you're looking at those specific applications. So if you're looking at a change like what we were looking at, you did see that I was in the change application ATF.
Okay. Here's the next question. Can you set up multiple tests with different parameters?
Yeah, that was one thing that we did talk about, using parameters. Here it is, parameter test. So we didn't do one, and really it would have been a great opportunity to set up some different data and run and see these 3 different examples happen. And that in this case, it looks like it's creating 3 different catalog items. So a great opportunity. Yes, you can do parameterized testing, and instead of just 3, you could have hundreds if so desired.
Okay, I think we have probably time for just maybe 1 or 2 questions. Okay. Here's one. Can you briefly identify some of the limitations, things we cannot do?
Okay. Let's see. So there's a couple of things that I've ran into that you can do. Okay, so for a change record, what I was really hoping for was specifically looking at the workflow and getting shots of how that goes. Because I know we do a lot of presentations, and you're doing a change. It's nice to look at that workflow and see it progress. So that's one thing. Some other things that can't be done, and they're getting better. If you're looking at the service portal and there's something specific that you want to look on there. It really takes some programming to set up specifically where you want ATF to look at. So an example may be, like I said about the cart, if you're expecting 5 items in there and you're looking on the UI page, for example, it's tough to look at that. It's still doable, but you got to do a little bit of DOM programming to do that. So hopefully that'll get a little bit better. They've already started, in New York, that they have that availability. So I expect that to get better too in future releases.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So since we're running out of time, everybody, thank you for attending. If you have any more questions, please email us at fields@closing.com. And thank you for attending the webinar. And see you all next month for our next Close webinar. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.